Florida almost completed a crazy comeback on Tuesday night, but the Georgia Bulldogs held on and might have just put themselves on the right side of the bubble.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, joined by our good buddy, Leif Thulin, and we are getting into it, a chock-a-block Tuesday night slate, as it's always been. We'll get you ready for Wednesday night, and y'all, we are coming down to it, like a week and a half left in the regular season for the major conferences, and I think we start some conference tournaments like early next week. I haven't even looked ahead at it yet, but man, y'all, it is almost here. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. And we want to remind you, you can listen to every one of these episodes ad-free on Amazon Music. We're so glad that you're joining us as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. If you're not in that Discord, by the way, you need to get in now. We're talking college basketball literally all day long. It's a blast. You want to know if your team is safe on the bubble, hop in, chat with us. That link is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Coming up on the show today, we're going to look back at Tuesday night's slate. Alabama, no problem for them at home against Mississippi State, and I think they hit every three-pointer in the history of three-pointers. We're going to look at the bubble. A lot of bubble teams won on Tuesday night, Leif Thulin. There ain't going to be enough space for everybody. We're going to look ahead to tonight's slate. We got a great matchup with Maryland hosting Michigan State. A whole bunch more bubble games going on. We'll get you ready for all that, but we got to start with a couple of ranked teams on the road losing on Tuesday night. Leif, we got to start in Athens, Georgia. Number 3, Florida goes on the road. Georgia wins this game 88-83. And it's not just the fact that they won, but it's how this game happened. The Bulldogs had lost 9 of 11 coming in. Their 2 wins in that stretch were home wins over South Carolina and LSU. There was nothing to suggest that this outcome was even a remote possibility. It's Georgia's first win against an AP top 5 team since 2004 per ESPN Stats and Info. And Leif, here's the wild swing of emotion from this game. Georgia was up 26 with 7:53 to go in the first half. They were still up 11 with only 3.5 minutes left. Gators go on a crazy 12-0 run to actually take a lead with 1.5 minutes left. They add a free throw to go up to 80-78, but then Blue Kane steps into a wing 3, wide open, pure, puts Georgia up 1. They hold on. Florida can't get it back over the top, and Georgia gets a massive win to solidify, hopefully, what they hope puts them on the right side of the bubble. Leif Thulin, is this enough for the Bulldogs, who were next 4 out for Lunardi coming into this game, to get into the tournament?
As it stands, yeah, you got to hope that there's not many bid stealers if you're Georgia, though, and you got to continue to take care of business. The funny thing is, I watched them play Auburn on Saturday and felt like they played a really good game. It was at Auburn, and Auburn was physical and strong and all the things that Auburn is, and Georgia held up well. So at home, you felt like they had a chance to be competent and competitive. So basically, if they can shoot the ball, Georgia's got a decent chance because athletically, their front court's up there with anyone in the country. Not just teams that are on the bubble, but anyone in the country. And that's what they did. They shot the ball very well at the beginning of the game, and they out-hustled, out-wanted it from Florida. Because Florida had a 1 seed. If it started today, they'd be a 1 seed. And Georgia needed it desperately, and I think you're going to see more and more of these games where a team needs it desperately, and they get it. Oklahoma did it the other day, and I know it was on a lesser scale, but they beat a team was it Ole Miss? Ole Miss or Mississippi State? One of the two.
It was Mississippi State.
Mississippi State. And they wanted it more and beat them, and Jeremiah Fears was awesome. I think you're seeing teams that have talent, even if it's talent that's been suppressed in SEC play because the rest of the team isn't as good. Those guys are going to shine, and the teams are going to play hard enough and win the game, while other teams are kind of looking at it as we got to get through this game because they have a bigger picture. And it is what it is. It's mentality. It's the way people are. Some people need it more, need the competitive juices flowing. And right now is crunch time for some teams, and other teams crunch times in a month. And I think that's just the way competitive nature is. And I think there's a bit of complacency from Florida and desperation from Georgia.
Yeah, and desperation can sometimes lead to overplaying, but in this case, man, the Bulldogs just got out and went. I mean, I was watching this game in real time, and I was just shocked, Leaf, and then to see Florida, like, because it was kind of just this gradual thing. A lot of times if you come back from a massive deficit like that, it's like just this one crazy, and Florida just kept inching their way back in until that 12-0 run late, and I could not believe it, but. The question is, you mentioned it, Florida is still in the running right now for a number 1 seed. When the committee revealed their top 16 a couple Saturdays ago, it was Auburn, Alabama, Duke, and Florida. But Leaf, since then, Houston has really been coming on. They've won 2 straight over Iowa State and Texas Tech, albeit over a Iowa State team that was missing literally their top 2 scores, and a Texas Tech team missing 2 of their top 3 scores. But hey, gotta step out and win the game, and Houston's done it. Already have at least a share of the Big 12, and if they could win the Big 12 tournament, and maybe even if they don't, I think Houston has a real shot at stealing away this number 1 seed from the Florida Gators. Leaf, where are you at in that final 1 seed conversation right now?
Yeah, they're a 1 seed hiding in plain sight. That was one of my segments on game night. Essentially, they beat Arizona in a really physical game against Arizona, who had been playing very well. And then they go out and take care of business against Iowa State. And you say, okay, Iowa State was missing players, but they really put together a good fight in that game.
They did. They really did.
Resume-wise, it doesn't take into the fact that no Gilbert, no Jones. It's still a good resume win. It's still a good resume win against Arizona. And they win those games. They take care of business. The difference between Houston and the other Houstons is they shoot 39% from 3. And I know your point was about seeding. Well, the thing is, they won the Big 12. And they're going to win a game. So they're going to win the Big 12.
Outright. Yeah, absolutely.
Outright. And then they probably are going to make the semis or the finals because they're going to have a double bye of the Big 12 tournament. So if you do that and the SEC has more teams fighting for it, I think one of Tennessee, Florida, Bama, like Auburn's the only team that's locked into a 1 seed right now, in my opinion, and probably Duke too. But one of Florida, Tennessee, Bama is going to lose early, maybe multiple. One of them could sneak in a win and therefore push someone down. But Houston has the clearest path to a 1 seed other than Auburn in the nation because I think they have a little bit less competition. And right now, they have all the wins that you want, and they've already won their conference. And they're going to have a bye to the semis, or at least to the quarters. And, I mean, they're really good. They're really good. So I think Florida and Tennessee and Bama have more likelihood of being a 2 than Houston does, even though all the brackets have them as a 2.
Yeah. And we'll talk Bama here in the next segment, but their closing schedule is bonkers, you guys. We'll talk about that if you haven't looked ahead at it. For Florida, their closing stretch, they host A&M, they're at Alabama, and then they host Ole Miss. As for Georgia, as I said, they came into that game next for out, at least at ESPN's bracketology. Leaf, they climbed 8 spots at KenPom after this win. They finish at Texas, at South Carolina, and against Vandy. So a lot of the outside of South Carolina, a lot of bubble games for Georgia in these final couple games. Let's move, Leaf, to Iowa State at Oklahoma State, another top 10 ranked team losing on the road on Tuesday night. Pokes win this thing at home 74-68. Curtis Jones was back for Iowa State, but still no Keshon Gilbert for them. And Leaf, while the final score is a respectable 6 points, Oklahoma State led this thing by 16 early in the second half, 42-26. Iowa State literally never led in this thing. It was a wire-to-wire win for the Cowboys. Leaf, here's what did it for me. Iowa State, 18 turnovers, led to OSU leading second chance points 24-10. Leaf, are you concerned about Iowa State, or are there struggles this year just a function of, hey, we lost a bunch when Momcilovic was out, and now we've lost 2 in a row with some combination of Gilbert and Jones being out?
I'm a little bit concerned that they need to coalesce once again once everyone's healthy. But I do think when everyone's healthy, they're really good. Even without their 2 best scorers, but you had Momcilovic and Lipsy playing against Houston, they were able to generate good looks and compete against one of the best teams in the nation that I believe should be a 1 seed, like I mentioned. And yeah, they need them healthy. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. They're one of the best backcourts in college basketball. They're veteran. They play good defense. They're playing with a higher tempo than they had in years past, leading to scoring. Well, when Momcilovic was out, they didn't have the spacing to score at the same rate. So he's back. You have more spacing, but you need someone to create looks, and that's where Keshon Gilbert comes in. Curtis Jones is a scorer. So I think they need every bit of the players every one of them healthy, and every bit of their games to be accentuated by having the others. And so I think they need to have a few games to settle. So I would be worried if it's only, hey, like we're going to sit out the Big 12 tourney and we're going to play. It doesn't inspire much faith for me. However, if they play the final 3 games, the Big 12 tourney, and then they're not particularly great and they fall to a 3 or 4, I do still have optimism about this team being better than that seed value, because all year they've been a 2 seed.
Yeah.
And when healthy, they're a 2 seed.
Yep. Yeah, I think the way things are going, to me, it feels like they're going to fall to a 3 seed. But if healthy, man, a 3 seed that literally no one is going to want to see. I'm with you. I still really believe in this team. And Curtis Jones, it was an illness he had been dealing with. Probably still feeling the effects of that some, even though we played on Tuesday night. And with Gilbert, it's a muscle strain that he's been out with. So really curious to see if they can get back fully healthy. And if they do, watch out, folks, could be a big thing. Oklahoma State, nowhere near the bubble, so no real conversation we need to have with that. For Iowa State, this is their first quad 2 loss. And then they also do have a Q3 on their resume at home against K-State. So that's just something to be aware of. Their closing schedule, they host Arizona. Oh, baby. They host BYU, who's been playing much better basketball. And then they close State. So it's not an easy stretch to close out for Iowa State ahead of the Big 12 tournament. A couple other just quick game notes, Leaf, before we move on to segment 2. Number 5, Tennessee, they did win on the road 65-59 against LSU. Whatever, it was fine. It was a win. Same for Louisville. They hung on against Virginia Tech in Blacksburg 71-66. Leaf, I think an important note we need to make here. Number 3, Duke blasts Miami 97-60, but lost Tyrese Proctor late in the first half. Looked like some sort of hyperextension. He came down, kind of one of those stiff knee situations. It didn't look like an ACL to me. Hopefully just a hyperextension or something where maybe he misses a game or 2. You don't want to risk that. He did leave the game on crutches as Duke left to go to the bus. But Leaf, this is something certainly for us to keep an eye on going forward here.
No doubt. And that's the point guard of the team. And I know Sion James handles it, but Tyrese Proctor is the best guard on a team that can win a national championship, and that really matters. Plus, he's a veteran presence, so definitely something to think about. But Duke, when they play their A game, they're untouchable. When
That's
Isaiah Evans goes off the bus and says, "You know what? I feel like shooting the ball today," you might as well pack the bags. Like it's over. If Schneider leaves him off the bench, he takes him off the bench and puts him in the ball game, and he hits that first one, might as well pack it up.
Yeah, man. And you, for those who missed it and want to hear more of that Duke A game discussion, go check out this past Saturday's Locked On College Basketball game night that Leaf hosts every Saturday night and led off that show talking about Duke's A game and just what a crazy performance they had over the weekend. Now, on Tuesday night, Leaf, we only had one ranked matchup, and in that, Alabama just absolutely took care of business at home. And it was a great night for a lot of bubble teams who took care of their business. We'll talk about all that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or maybe if Florida's making a crazy push in the second half and you want to get in on that action, you can do so live. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine some of those live bets into a same-game parlay. It's great when you win with FanDuel because you get paid instantly. Tonight, how about a line for tonight? Our ranked matchup, number 8 Michigan State at number 16 Maryland. We'll unpack that game here in a little bit. 6:30 Eastern on Big Ten Network. FanDuel has it Maryland -4.5. Interesting stuff. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, that's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, make every moment more. The official sports betting partner of the NBA. Leaf, Tuesday night in Tuscaloosa, Alabama went wacky. Number 24, Mississippi State at the Tide, number 6 in the nation, and the Tide roll through this thing. And yes, I did intentionally invert that phrase. 111-73. Leaf, Alabama desperately needed to win this game, and they got it. Why? Because not only did they have this game, but after this game, they have a crazy, crazy stretch. And coming into this one, by the way, they were 1-2 in their last 3, losing to Auburn and then at Missouri. But their closing 3-game stretch at number 5, Tennessee, hosting number 3, Florida, and then at number 1, Auburn. So their final 3 games of the regular season are against top 5 teams. That is brutal. So Bama desperately needed this one, and Leaf, they got it in a big way.
They sure did. And all year the story's been they shoot a lot of threes, but they don't make a lot of threes. Yet they play with enough pace that most teams they can outlast and out possession, out mathematics. Well, it doesn't matter in a game, even if you shot only as many threes as you shot in the first half in this one, that the game's over because Alabama, they finally got out of the spell. You know, they talk about regression to the mean. This is one game in the right direction then because they shot the cover off the ball. And Chris Youngblood was sensational. This is the Chris Youngblood you expected to get in the transfer portal. He started the year injured, and I think that's important to note about how they've had times where the team doesn't look perfectly cohesive. The lineups have shifted. Well, Chris Youngblood had his coming out party, knocking down 3 after 3. Mark Sears entering this game had back-to-back 30 pieces, and yet in this game I felt like even was in more control. In the bits I watched, he looked in more control, able to score, able to facilitate, and it looks better when you're facilitating. The guys are hitting shots when you penetrate. This is the Alabama everyone envisioned with either the number 1 or number 2 preseason ranking, and they're certainly capable, if they play like this, of beating anyone in the country.
Yeah, Leaf, it feels like there are a lot of teams like this where the ceiling is national championship good. I cannot wait for March Madness, dude. It's going to be absolutely crazy. And to Leaf's point about the threes, folks, they took 45 threes in this game and made 22 of them. If they're going to take 45 and make just shy of half, you ain't winning any of those basketball games. As Leaf said, a great night for Youngblood, 7 of 11. I cannot imagine this team if they had both him and Reitzel healthy at the same time. 21 points, 10 assists for Mark Sears. And Leaf, you talked about the rotation or the personnel for Alabama. 3 straight games now, Coach Oates has had a new starting lineup. Not different in those 3 games, but the last 3 games has been the same. Jaron Stevenson has been coming off the bench, and LeBaron Philon, the great freshman, has been inserted into that starting lineup, along with Mark Sears and Chris Youngblood in the backcourt, and then joining Grant Nelson and Cliff Amore, the usual starters in the front court. Do you like that quintet, Leaf, or do you want to see it go back to Stevenson in there instead of Philon?
Now, I'm a believer in Jaron Stevenson. I thought he should start at the start of the year, but I think this quintet is able to put more pressure on the rim and therefore generate better looks from threes for better shooters. So the team has to scramble more as opposed to, intentionally leave Stevenson, intentionally leave Sherrell, Nelson even. Nelson's a very streaky shooter, and unfortunately for you, Isaac, his best performance ever was against Carolina, and everyone believed, he's an amazing shooter because of it. And I was dying over that game too. I had Carolina in my bracket. But my point being, I think that the good shooters are getting shots because there's more pressure put on the rim by having more guards. And therefore, if you come off a screen and one of the guys rolls, you only have one guy to help off of instead of having 2 to help off of. And now Youngblood and Philon and Sears are the guys shooting Holloways, Deadeye on the second unit. And so you have the guys you want shooting threes that are the most potent from deep, taking the threes because you have more pressure put on the rim by having multiple guards. So I am a fan of this lineup. I think there are teams that they're better suited to play the bigger lineup. For instance, when they played Houston and they played a lineup that featured Darion Reed, who's been out, and they played Diabate and they played Omarui and they played Nelson and 3 of the 4 at all times. That's really helpful. But most teams don't have that size to punish Alabama.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing. Even with losing Reitzel, they've got so many different lineup combinations that Coach Oates can trot out based on what a certain game dictates, and I like that. Let's talk Mississippi State really quick, and then I'll move us to the bubble. The Bulldogs fall to 7-8 in SEC play. It's just a tough stretch. They lost at Oklahoma over the weekend, a great bubble win, by the way, for the Sooners, who are back in action tonight. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Leaf, just like I said about Georgia, they've got a whole bunch of bubbly games, and Mississippi State is in no danger of being a bubble team themselves. But to close the SEC, they host LSU, they host Texas, and then they're at Arkansas. So they have a chance to do some real damage to the bubble hopes of both the Longhorns and the Hogs, and we'll see what happens there down the stretch. Speaking of the bubble, Leaf, we had a lot of bubble winners on Tuesday night. Obviously, we already talked about Georgia, who I think is the biggest bubble winner of Tuesday night. I mean, I don't even think that's debatable. And then let me list off some others. Leaf, I want to know who your second biggest winner bubble was and who you think the biggest bubble loser was. Cincinnati, Man, I don't think they're really much in the bubble conversation anymore, but there is still some hope. They hold off Baylor 69-67 late. VJ Edgecombe can't finish in the closing seconds. Every little bit does help, though. Baylor also, by the way, don't mess around and screw this thing up. Georgia Tech wins at Pittsburgh 73-67. That's the Panthers' second quad 3 loss of the season. That's no good. West Virginia absolutely crushed TCU at home 73-55. Illinois, Gonzaga, not really on the bubble, but Illinois had been in a free fall. They were both in don't mess around territory, and boy, did they not. Illinois spanks Iowa 81-61. Gonzaga goes on the road to Santa Clara. Close game at the half, but they really have a great second, 95-76. And then San Diego State gets a very big home win over the Lobos, 73-65. Leaf, who's your second biggest bubble winner from last night?
I'd go San Diego State.
Yeah.
Because the Mountain West has been very good for a couple of years, but this year it's not as prolific as it has been the last couple of years. So you need a couple marquee wins. And this is a marquee win, beating a team that likely is in the field right now. And there aren't enough of those possibilities. Whereas in the SEC, that's every other day. So I think that's got to be based on the opportunity to accumulate those wins, the biggest. And then I would say the biggest loss has to be Pittsburgh, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because Pittsburgh at the start of the year was, I want to say, ranked even in the top 15, maybe top 13. And since then, they've been in a bit of a nosedive where you beat the teams that are at the bottom of the ACC, are 500 the teams in the middle of the ACC, and don't beat any of the teams near the top. And it's not a great ACC. So I think Pittsburgh's out. I think West Virginia had a big win, but at the same time, they're going to be hurt by the fact that DeVries isn't playing. And I know it's unfair. It's unfair, but the people want to see the teams that are playing well later in the season, and their biggest wins came in November, and that hurts them.
Well, Leaf, for San Diego State, I'm with you. They were in last four bye territory, at least for Lunardi on coming into the game on Tuesday night. But I really think that this might have been the thing that solidified it for them. You know, I mean, obviously you don't want to drop games down the stretch here, but really, really big win for the Aztecs. I'm with you there. Illinois, glad to see them stop their free fall. They're too good of a team to be messing around here, and that's good stuff there. Now, Leaf, we got another great slate on Wednesday night, a big-time Big Ten showdown in Maryland, and a whole bunch more bubble action, including a double bubble situation inside Bud Walton Arena coming up tonight. Let's unpack all that in just a second. Leaf, we got a great slate for Wednesday, as we have most of this year, man. Tuesday and Wednesday have just been electric. I absolutely love it. Tonight, number 8 Michigan State at 16 Maryland, 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Big Ten Network. Leaf, as I said, FanDuel favors the homestanding Terps by 4.5. Somewhere SVP is smiling and happy. Is Derek Queen going to take it to the Spartans tonight?
Yes. I mean, I got to think he does. But at Michigan State, the thing about them is, yes, Jace Richardson's emerged as that guy. And instead of having, 8 different guys who can score 8 points, now they have one guy who can score 20 plus, and then the other guys that are supplementary. So even if Derek Queen takes it to the Spartans have better depth than Maryland's Crab 5. It's not the Fab 5, it's the Crab 5.
I see. Did you coin that? I've not heard that before.
No, I saw an Instagram poster. I don't know who did it. It was just it was a graphic. I don't think anyone said it.
I like it. I'm all in on Crab 5.
So they got a really good starting 5, but their depth is not particularly good. Michigan State always has tremendous depth. Michigan State's always been good against big guys, except Zach Edey. Like, if you look at the history of teams that they've played, no matter how good their bigs are, they typically fare very well against bigs. And even if they don't have prolific bigs of their own. So I think they're going to put a lot of bodies at him. I think Derek Queen will get his. I think Maryland should be favored, and I think they are narrow favorites, but I don't know. Sparty's got a little bit about them, It was warm the other day. I wore shorts outside, and I'm a t-shirt and shorts guy. No matter, all year it's snowing, but I felt March. Isaac, how many games do you think I watched, full games on the random night I had off, of March Madness?
12.
God, that was a great guess. 13.
Oh,
13, and I watched some Sparty, and they have a little bit of that feel. It's February, and then it's Izzo. It's trickling towards Izzo time, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Spartans get it. But Maryland's a really good team, and they're kind of that team everyone's going to think, wow, they got an NBA prospect, and they got a guard that's a veteran, so they got the formula, and they do. I just don't love the depth. So I think it's going to be a great game. I don't feel confident either way in this one.
And here's what's interesting about it from like a Big Ten seeding perspective. Folks, if you don't realize this, Purdue has lost 4 straight games now. So they've tumbled down to 5th in the Big Ten standings. Maryland is the recipient. They are right now 4th, a half game back of Wisconsin. The difference is in the win column. Wisconsin 12-5, Maryland 11-5. If the Terps can win this thing, man, really going towards solidifying themselves as a top 4 seed in the Big Ten. And that's important because that would mean a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. That's something they're certainly looking for. Leaf, I cannot wait for this game. Just one other game I want to mention before we hit the bubble. Ole Miss at number 1, Auburn tonight, 7 on ESPN2. FanDuel has it. Auburn minus 13.5. I don't expect anything, but Ole Miss has just tumbled out of the rankings, and Chris Beard's team need some good solid wins. You know, you talked earlier about Florida kind of having a yawner and not showing up like they needed to. I don't expect Auburn to not do that, but I think this Ole Miss team is getting to a point where they're like, man, we really need some good wins. Again, they're 6-7 range in the tournament, but just keep your eyes on a good game there in Auburn tonight. Leaf, let's go to the bubble. We got probably 8 or 9 bubble games tonight, but I want to start with the double bubble, my favorite double bubble of the night. Texas at Arkansas, 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. This is a game that will immediately follow that Auburn game. FanDuel has it Hogs minus 3.5. And Leaf, at the latest bracketology from Lunardi, Texas is a last 4 bye. Arkansas, a last 4 in. I think that win over the weekend really, really helped the Hogs get into this position. What's going to happen here?
I don't know. Both these teams feel like waste of talent in terms of their roster accumulation. Like, you knew that they didn't fit together. You were frustrated, or at least I was frustrated, that Tremont, Mark, and Pope and Johnson, all these guys who are on-ball guys, are supposed to play away from the ball. It made no sense. Arkansas is similar. I think Arkansas is better and playing better, so I'd lean their way. But I don't have any confidence. I'm not a Calipari guy by any means.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what to make of it. What you said about Maryland, I'm kind of with on Texas. We need something for their top 5, like Horns 5 or something. That's not clever, but to me, we've talked a lot this year that Texas doesn't have a ton of depth either, but that first 5 or so is really, really good. But Arkansas seems to have figured some things out, playing better lately. I'm going to be really dialed in on this game. We'll definitely talk about it, and it might be the lead on tomorrow's show, depending on what happens in Maryland. Leaf, let me read off the rest of the bubble games, and I want to get your take on 1 or 2 of those that you're really paying attention to. I've just put the rest of these in chronological order here. Vandy at number 12, A&M, 7 Eastern on SEC Network. FanDuel has it A&M minus 7.5. K-State at UCF, 7 Eastern on FanDuel has it UCF minus 5.5. K-State, not really much of a hope right now, but could get a big road win here. One that I'm keeping my eyes closely on as well, Penn State at Indiana, 8:30 p.m. on Big Ten Network. FanDuel has it Hoosiers minus 6.5. That team coming off the win over the aforementioned Boilermakers. And here's my really spicy one here. Number 17, Kentucky at Oklahoma, 9 Eastern on SEC Network. FanDuel has it Wildcats minus 2.5. That's going on at the exact same time as the Texas-Arkansas game. Oh, baby, you know that's some split screen action. We've also got Virginia at Wake Forest, 9 Eastern on ESPNU. FanDuel has it Wake Forest minus 7.5. Demon Deacons don't mess around. Utah State at Boise State. That's a super fun one there. 10:30 Eastern on FS1. Boise minus 4.5. Ohio State out on the West Coast swing. They're at USC tonight, 10:30 Eastern on Big Ten Network. Buckeyes minus 1.5. That is very intriguing. Can Ohio State do work out on the West Coast? And then Leaf, finally, SMU at Cal, 11 Eastern on ESPNU. FanDuel has it SMU minus 3.5. The SMU also out on the ACC version of that West Coast swing. Leaf, that's a whole crazy bubble slate tonight. Outside of the double bubble, what are you most looking forward to?
I got a question for you. Ohio State should not be on the bubble. They're 15-13.
Yeah.
Like, they'd have to win out and do well in the Big Ten tournament. I know that you're not making up that they're on the bubble. I'm just saying that they're 15-13 and they're not particular. Like, they're talented, but that doesn't mean that they're good. SMU, I know they're 20-7, but I don't feel like they're a tournament team either. They just lost by 30 plus at home. And so I'm very excited for Utah State, Boise State to answer your question. That's the one that, like I said, exact same thing about San Diego State getting that win. There's not as many marquee matchups in that league. It's New Mexico, Boise State, Utah State, San Diego State. Whenever those two play, or two of those four play against one another, I'm always tuned in. And I think that's very impressive. And then Oklahoma has a chance to punch their ticket. If they win at home against Kentucky, I think they punch their ticket because they have wins over Michigan. They have wins early in the season, and then they struggled, but they got a big win the other night. Jeremiah Fears is got it going right now. Kentucky's not a good defensive team. Lamont Butler is questionable in this game. And so that might make a huge difference because if he guards Fears, I don't feel like Fears has a great game. If he doesn't, Fears might explode. And so I that's the one I'm watching most closely other than the double bubble game.
Yeah, Oklahoma ended that 5-game losing streak on Saturday, winning at home over Mississippi State. And they got a lot of other kind of bubble action and strong SEC teams to close out. So they got to grab everyone they can. To your point about Ohio State, it's funny, their last 4 buys at Lunardi, but Bracket Matrix, which is the thing that, brings all of these brackets together, has them as the first team out. So meaning like of the first 4 out, they would be right at the top of that list per Bracket Matrix. So Ohio State's interesting. Like Jerry Palm at CBS has them just out, and so I'm really curious. They got to win probably both parts of this California swing if they want to hang in here. Leif, lots of stuff to be tuned in for, folks. If you want to see more of the bubble team cheering guide, I'm literally, after I post this video and get the audio up, I'm going to put up Wednesday night's bubble team cheering guide, so you can look for that on my social media. Leif, anything else you're looking for tonight before we get out of here?
I just love the hoops action. I think the Big Ten game's the one I'm most excited for, even though it's not bubble-licious. I think Michigan State, if they win this, they seize control. I know they're a half game up already, but that's a tough thing to overcome for the rest of the Big Ten. If Maryland wins this game, like they're favored to do, it becomes a serious battle for who gets the top spot in the Big Ten, and that'll be very fun to watch because I think there's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten. I don't think there's any great teams. I thought Purdue is overrated. I thought a few of the other teams are overrated. Michigan State, and Maryland are the pleasant surprises based on where they were picked before the season. And now they might be dueling for the top spot if Maryland wins this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was on a show yesterday and somebody asked me, who's the best team in the Big Ten? I was like, exactly. Who is the best?
The question is, who's the best in the regular season? Because I think the one that's got the most potential is probably Wisconsin, even though I don't think they can catch up.
Yeah, that's the problem. Schools have a 2-game lead in the loss column right now over Wisconsin and Maryland. But I'm with you. I think Wisconsin's there. Now, the thing for Wisconsin is that they get to play Michigan State again, although it is in East Lansing, and then they get Minnesota and Penn State. So if Wisconsin could win out here, who knows what happens? Here's what I'm hoping for is that regular season game that ends in the Breslin Center between Michigan State and Michigan will really decide the Big Ten regular season championship. But that Big Ten tournament, I'm with you, Leif. I think Wisconsin might be the team right now where I'd put my Big Ten tournament money. You guys, great show today. Thank you so much for being here with Leif and I at the lunch hour, at least on the East Coast. So fun. Can't wait to be back tomorrow. I'll be hosting things, wrapping up Wednesday night's slate of action. There probably isn't much on Thursday, but we'll get ready for what we need to there. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On College Basketball on YouTube, make sure you do so now so you don't miss any of this great content. If you're not listening on the audio, you should do that as well so you can check it all out as you're working out or driving or whatever you do. And we mentioned it earlier, but come join us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord. It's absolutely free. That link is in the show notes. It's a great way to hang out with other college basketball junkies like Leif and myself every single day. Apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wild Pope. Shouts to our guy Mick Bruin. And until tomorrow, peace.